recognized as the house that Mike Bush built. The House of Delegates is comprised of 141 experienced and talented individuals who are leaders in their own right. Certainly, I can never say enough about Speaker Bush for that wonderful opportunity he gave each of us back in 2003. Speaker Bush believed in inclusiveness, he believed in everyone having a seat at the table, and he believed in fairness. All traits that certainly, if I'm afforded that opportunity, I'd like to carry forward as well. This is a critical moment in our state. As you know, we represent 3 of the 24 jurisdictions in the state, and we all agree that we must represent the best solutions that put the interest of children and families first. Our families, whether they're from Crisfield or Cumberland, or from thriving metropolis areas or the rural areas of our state. Maryland is a state rich with resources, and the greatest of them is our citizens. In my leadership role, I've built teams out of diverse groups of individuals representing different perspectives, different interests, and sometimes just plain old differences. I want to promote and foster collaboration among all parties. I will work on behalf of the people that puts everyone on a more level playing field, while also supporting an environment that's conducive and competitive to the business community, which drives our local economy. I'm not running for speaker to represent a single caucus, be it the Democratic caucus, the Black caucus, the Women's caucus, or any other caucus. I'm running to be Speaker of the Maryland House of Delegates. This is an important race and a pivotal moment in the Maryland House of Delegates. We are attempting to break glass ceilings in the next election for Speaker, no matter who it may be. It is not the decision of any particular party or interest group or other outside influences, but rather the men and women who work each and every day during session and year round to make smart choices for all of our constituents. In this time, we need maturity, honest dialogue, and real solutions. We have embraced the party. It's time for the party to embrace us. And with the support of the team, I am ready to lead this chamber of talented, committed individuals who represent communities with different needs and competing interests. At this time, I once again want to thank the Majority Whip and certainly the Speaker Pro Tem for the sacrifices that they have made to bring our state together and to be a unifying force in our community. And with that, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Delegate.
Yes.
Could you talk about, from a statement perspective, if colleagues select you as House Speaker, what it sends to have an African-American leader in the state of Maryland?
I think it signals that Maryland believes in inclusiveness. One of the things I've noted was 25 years ago when Delegate Branch and I came into the House of Delegates, it was 4 white males, 1 white female, and 1 African American who held the 6 committee chairmanships, the 6 primary committee chairmanships. 25 years later, when you look at the Democratic constituency, we've seen we now have 3 women, a core constituency of the Democratic Party, and 3 members of the LGBTQ community. But we still have that same 1 African American representing our community. Certainly that's not a criticism of anyone. I've seen the growth of us in terms of subcommittee chairmanships and vice chairmanship, but at some point, it's not good enough for us to hold the number 2 and number 3 position. At some point, the party has to support us, it has to support our community, and know that we can be leaders as well. So while I'm grateful and thankful for all the growth that we have seen, it's this glass ceiling that we're attempting to break through now to show that African Americans can be statewide leaders and not just of their own jurisdictions.
Delegate Davis.
You mentioned the party. How much of this alliance, the Speaker Pro Tem, has to do with the back and forth between the Black Caucus and the state party chairwoman?
For me personally, It has nothing to do with that. Speaker Pro Tem and I have worked closely for the last 17 years. She mentioned that I got there before her by about 2 years. So she's, for all practical purposes, we came in at the same time. We've been in constant dialogue, trying to decide what's best, what we feel is best for the House of Delegates. All of the other stuff that's going on, I'll let other people comment on their motivations and intentions, but we're just trying to do what we feel is best for the state of Maryland.
Delegate Davis.
Can you-
Delegate Davis,
Let me answer what she said. A lot of times we're elected, we have an outside interest. It doesn't help us at all. We have a body of 140 individuals that will make the decision of who will be speaker. I mean, we don't need threats. We don't need that kind of verbiage to be in the paper or be on TV. I mean, these two people, for the integrity that they had for the institution, came together, worked together. They've known each other for the last 24 years, and they came together and made the decision of who would step forward for this. We knew we couldn't have two people in the African American position for this seat. We all know that. Everybody knows that, for Pete's sake. So right now, we're doing what we have to do to say that it is now our time. Sun Paper, I know they're here, written that this is not the time, but when is the time, if not now?
Delegate
Davis, what are you gonna do for
Davis,
black
let
people
me
in
ask,
Maryland?
let me ask this question as it relates to the counts, because a number of folks will suggest that you may have had enough just by yourself, and Jones had some, and I know you, Delegate Talmadge Branch, have always told me you have never lost a vote count.
I have not.
Where are the numbers, and will you need numbers from the other party to make it over the hump, if you will?
In terms of the numbers, I don't believe it's appropriate at this point in time. The numbers will be revealed May 1st. The important thing to note is that we're constantly talking to the members of the General Assembly, the House of Delegates in specific, who have votes. And we're going to continue that conversation up until noon on May 1st, noon this coming Wednesday. So I think that's the important takeaway from this. Everybody, to their credit, they recognize the importance that we are at a defining moment, a defining period, that we're moving on from the great leadership of Mike Bush into the next step, the next phase of our history. So those conversations are ongoing. I'm going to be having them all the way up through May 1st, and I'm confident that come May 1st, we will have the votes we need.
And will Talmadge be the vote counter?
Of course I will. Who else?
We have two questions, one
Delegate
here and
Davis.
one there.
Oh, sorry.
One here and one there, you sir.
Delegate Davis, can you respond to the criticism that electing Maryland's first black speaker shouldn't come at the cost of fracturing the party and shouldn't be done with GOP support?
What I would say is this: we're all professionals. I sort of laugh at those comments about fracturing the party. I've been there 25 years. It certainly can get rough and tumble, and have been over any number of years, but we're all professionals. We're passionate about this decision. We recognize how important it is, but when that time comes, whether it's me, all members of the General Assembly, to unite behind our new leader and do what they're supposed to do. This talk of fracturing, this is politics. It's been referred to as a blood sport. So to think that that we aren't going to break a few eggs from time to time as we make decisions is just fallacy. This isn't the first time that we've had disagreement, that things haven't been all, as they say, peaches and cream, but we've come together and we're going to do our jobs, and I have faith in each and every member that they will.
Would you be willing to assume the speakership based on support of Republicans and a minority of Democrats?
I've been listening to that discussion, and that hasn't been my issue. I believe in governing in a bipartisan fashion, making sure that everybody has a seat at the table. This country has a a very sordid history as it relates to trying to silence voices. And as I say history, we can also say presence. We have a history of trying to silence voices, and that's not something I can subscribe to. It's just not something I believe in. I think all voices need to be heard, and whatever the majority decision is, which is what our country is based upon, majority rule, that'll be the decision.
Chairman Davis, when the Democratic caucus takes its vote on the speakership, if you're not the selection, would you commit to supporting Delegate McIntosh if she's the choice of the caucus?
My role in all of this, again, I haven't thought of, quite frankly, not winning. It's not how I'm built. I've been focused strictly on winning, going after each and every member in the Democratic caucus, soliciting their vote, listening to their voices. I've heard a number of changes and ideas from the members who felt, quite frankly, frustrated that they haven't been more involved in the process. So that's where my focus has been, trying to figure out how we can be even more inclusive, how we can meet those needs. As far as what happens after that, I think we have to cross that bridge when we get to it.
Delegate Davis.
Delegate Davis. Now that the three black leaders have come together on one accord, does this send a message to the Black Caucus, the legislative Black Caucus, that they should take and get behind your policy?
We're not really trying to send messages in terms of how people should vote. Well, I guess the message that we're trying to send is that we're together, we're trying to unite behind one, and that we want to be on the same accord, the same page, with the same message moving forward. Ultimately, people's vote is their own. We can't control that. We can't, and nor do we want to. We want everybody to vote their conscience and do what they think is in the best interest of all Marylanders.
Delegate Davis, considering the amount of special interest money you've gotten, how conservative you are, and that you are not flatly refusing to caucus with Republicans, how can you work with black voters, especially in our home, Prince George's County, and also work with Republicans? Please tell me how you plan to balance that.
Well, let me start by saying, I don't think anyone that's actually conservative will refer to me as conservative. See, that's
You don't believe in the Citizens United court case, for instance, I've heard. Is this true?
I have said no such thing.
Okay. May I ask a final question then, if you thought those were pointed? Delegate McIntosh has released a platform on her specific wants of the caucus. Will you do such before the vote in the Democratic caucus?
No, I will not, and here's the reason why, and I was starting to touch upon that earlier. A number, in particular the freshmen, a number of people I've spoken to, they felt that they haven't had a voice in the agenda of the caucus or the agenda of the House, that it was just presented to them and they had to take it or leave it. What I plan to do, and what I had actually pledged to a few of them, was that we would sit down in some sort of retreat fashion and discuss the priorities and concerns that are around the state, and also told them, as we discussed that, what we're going to do going forward, we'd also have to have discussions, the hard discussions. And I know the Speaker Pro Tem knows this better than I do, but certainly with the budget for FY21, we're projected to have a $1 billion deficit, growing, if unaddressed, growing to $1.6 billion by 2024. Those are things that cannot be discounted. So we're going to discuss. My plan is to bring the group together. We discuss what our priorities are going to be, and then we also have to have discussions about how we're going to pay for those priorities. But I don't want, and I don't think it's appropriate, given what I've learned, to come out and say we're going to do this, we're going to do that, without first having the input of the caucus.
Even though Mike Bush did it last session.
Mayor.
Let's do two more questions if you don't mind.
Yes,
Go ahead.
first a question for African American chairmanships in the delegation. Would you support more African American chairs to, particularly Baltimore related, to various chairmanships of committees?
I certainly want to make sure that everyone has a seat at the table. Quite frankly, I've refrained from making those kinds of promises because I think that's divisive. What I want to do is sit down, if I have that opportunity, to appoint the chairman, if I won the speakership, and just make what's the best decision, regardless of color, to lead those committees. Obviously, I want to promote African Americans, provide more opportunities, but I also want to do that for women. Our Asian Pacific Caucus, they have members as well. So I'm going to be as inclusive and as balanced as I possibly can. But it certainly will be at the forefront of making sure that there are opportunities for everyone.
Any thoughts on
Can
the,
you comment
And you
on
have
how,
to provide a balance for the state. So it has to be representative of what our state looks like and geographic. So it just can't pile with somebody or a number of people from one particular.
If each of you want more, we should finish.
any thoughts on the situation here in Baltimore with the mayor and what the legislature may or may not do as it relates to what's going on here?
I think there's still things to unfold here in the city, and not knowing enough information, about what's still to come. It'd be premature for me to opine, I think, beyond what's already been said, and we'll wait and see the fallout, and if any legislative action needs to occur, certainly that's something we would address. But at this point in time, I think we're very early in this process, and I get the temptation to want to jump in early and make certain pronouncements, but I think that would be a bit irresponsible. I want to wait and see the results of the investigation, see where we are, and then we take it from there.
can you comment on the unusually public nature of this race? A lot of the leadership decisions, a lot of vote whipping, a lot of these sorts of discussions that happen in Annapolis usually happen behind closed doors without, public press conferences, without people sending, questionnaires, without lobbying groups weighing in. Can you comment on why you think this is particularly public and how that might be changing the dynamics?
Maybe that's the problem.
I think some of it is, we've never actually, during my time, had a real speakers race, period. I mean, I hear a lot of people opining about, how this is public, how it's this or that, but we've never really had that, of this nature. Personally, I think this is good for our democracy. Coronations are never good. I've said that many times. Coronations are never good. There's nothing wrong with putting out competing visions, viewpoints, and letting the public evaluate the situation as it may be. I believe the days of doing everything, in the smoky rooms and the smoky back rooms and so forth, those are giving way to greater calls for transparency and openness and inclusion. So maybe it's not as neat and as tidy as we're accustomed to, but I think that's okay. I think it's great. You all are here evaluating what we have to say, and I'm sure, the same coverage has been given to my colleague. I think that's a great thing.
If a real race for speaker is good for democracy, as you say, there's been some discussion of term limiting the next speaker, or even the committee leaders. Is that something that you support?
Those ideas, everything's on the table, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I've actually had those conversations. They've been put to me by the members of the legislature, not just the Democratic caucus, but I've heard others, opine on that particular subject. Everything's on the table. And that's what I mentioned earlier about, as opposed to coming out saying, we will do this, we will do that. I want to bring the body together and also take a look at how that would look. There are a lot of, mechanics to putting something like that in place, so we would certainly need to have those conversations as well. But I'm not here, if the underlying question is, am I looking to come and stay 16 years? No, that's not what I'm trying to do. So I just believe at this point in time that I can provide the kind of leadership that we need, but I'm not looking to stay if anybody's worried about that.
Will you flatly refuse Republican vice chairships?
Yes.
Okay.
Delegate Davis,
Yeah.
so essentially with today's announcement, do you believe you do have enough votes to become the next speaker?
Again, we're still working and talking and moving forward. I think it would be premature and unfair to the body for me to declare victory or anything like that. I think May 1st is 5 days from now. We'll know soon enough who has the votes. I just want to continue to talk to my colleagues, hear their thoughts, get their visions, and see where our visions mesh and where they don't. But in terms of the results will be what they'll be, and we'll be accepting of it. I think me and my colleague, Chairwoman McIntyre, whatever the body decides, we'll certainly be supportive of that, and whoever emerges as the eventual winner of the race.